And welcome everybody to another episode of Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition in conjunction with our broadcast partners at Tri-X 57. We are wrapping up the month of September here, and we are with Dan Skeldon. Palma Shiles, like we said last week, could not be here with us this week either, but she will be back with us in October. All is good with her. No worries there. Dan, you know, it's at that time of year where like the sun just isn't working as much. Like I'm out of sun tanning season now, you know, in the later part of September. I fade to white. I fade back to pale.
Yeah, I think colors are fading across the area. I mean, at least the foliage is going to make up for it soon, right? That'll explode in color to kind of make up for the pale white that will be growing on everyone else.
Yeah. Somewhere where there isn't much fall foliage is the state of Florida, and that is the key and the genesis for our Tidal Flooding Talk for today. We're very pleased to bring on Amy Wicks, who's the owner and professional engineer for Wicks Consulting Group. I actually wanted to share this with our audience here after I watched the video the Wall Street Journal did on her work in Babcock Ranch, Florida, and we'll talk all about it in the next half hour or so. But first, you know, Amy, you know, late September in Florida, still cooking, right? Hot, humid, getting suntan, maybe a couple burns here and there.
Plenty hot. We're still definitely in the 90s. And obviously we're already into the evening and we're in the 80s still. So plenty hot here in Florida and lots of thunderstorms to go around too.
I could use, you know, I think I could, I never lived in Florida. I've been to Florida, of course. I think I could do a summer there, I think. But a lot of people, you know, from Jersey, they go down and they're like, nah, summer's just too darn hot. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe one.
I don't recommend it.
Don't
Maybe
recommend
March.
it. Okay. Yeah, that's a better time of year. Okay. So, you know, the purpose of this episode and what we want to talk about is you really were the main person to help make this this community, Babcock Ranch. I don't know if we want to call it flood proof or hurricane proof, but since 2017, Irma, Ian, Milton, and Helene came through it, virtually no flooding. And that's just tremendous to think about for somewhere in Florida. So let's just start off real basic here. Where is Babcock Ranch in Florida, and how close is it to bodies of water or estuaries that would normally bring flooding?
So Babcock Ranch is about 20 miles northeast of Fort Myers, Florida. So on the southwest coast along the Gulf Coast. And we're about 15 miles inland from the coast. So you can get to a beach if you go as the crow flies in about a 30-minute drive, I would say, generally speaking, depending on traffic.
Got it.
So, Amy, Babcock Ranch was promoted as the first solar-powered city in the United States. Does the power source and does that promotion does that tie into how much is that a factor in the hurricane-proof nature or the flood-proof nature of the town?
I mean, a portion of it really does. So we utilize the solar fields actually for additional storage. So as you would normally go driving around and see a solar field just out anywhere in the United States, you usually see the panels are pretty low. It's dry underneath. A lot of times you'll have sheep that help mow all of the grass underneath. And out here, especially during the summers, those fields actually store additional water. All of those panels are raised a lot higher. So it helps us mitigate that flow of water. So we're not getting too much water into the community. So in that sense, it helps. And then overall, the power grid, the way we set up the power grid at Babcock Ranch, everything is underground. So it's a lot safer. We have our own individual duct banks, and the way we designed everything to be double looped. So if one substation goes down, we still have power coming from another direction. The switch just clicks over the other way. So the way the substation was set up to go with the solar power is critical to making sure that our lights stay on, especially during Ian, when the majority of our entire 3-county area all lost power.
So, you know, before we get into that, how you did all this and your work, I want to talk about the dollar amounts, because that's always, money's always at top of people's minds. Can you put a dollar amount onto how much it costs to make Babcock Ranch flood proof? And then explain how much savings the town has seen just from, maybe what would have happened if it wasn't flood proof for the past 4 hurricanes that came through. And then kind of like a side question to that is Babcock Ranch in a flood zone because of the work you've done? Like, are you out of the flood zone? Were you ever in the flood zone? How does that work?
I might have to have you remind me of some of the questions.
Okay. The money part. So how much did it cost? What is there a number you could put to do all of this proofing?
There honestly, there isn't. And I've worked with other communities to try to implement some of these things. And really what we try to do, because I think one of the key words is resiliency. So we want to be resilient. And so we try to pair a lot of what we do directly into things that are already going to be done. So if we know we're building a park at Babcock Ranch, we want to utilize that park to do things that will then make the entire community safer. But we're already building a park, so there's already a cost associated with that. In some situations, we do make sure that like our roads are a little bit higher and things like that. And we've honestly never gone back and attributed a value to that. I know in speaking directly with the developer, he has said outright, especially after Hurricane Ian, when we had a lot of people living here at the time, that the money spent was well worth it and far outweighed after we had no damage, anything that he could have saved up front. So
got it. And then as far as the flood zone goes, how does that work with the town?
So when the property was purchased, it was in a deflood zone, which means it wasn't mapped, but they assumed it was going to flood based on the characteristics of the soil and things like that. So the whole thing needed mapped. So really what we did is we went back and we studied aerials of what had happened prior to any farm fields being out here, anything being ditched, anything at all, and really started to look at where the water flowed. And we captured those and preserved all of those areas where it looked like those waters did flow when you would get heavy rainfall events, even if it was connected wetlands that would overflow into one another. Preserved those areas and then raised the uplands even further. And then we went and mapped it after we went ahead and said, this is what we're going to do to the land afterwards. So all of the floodplain is independent of anywhere that we've constructed on at this point.
Got it.
So we've isolated it to those areas where we saw that the flow naturally went.
Right.
So Amy, what are like the main ingredients? Like, what are the key ingredients or key factors you want a hurricane proof or flood proof a town? Like what are like the 4 or 5, keys to the success of Babcock Ranch being as immune as it has been so far?
One of it is the location of it, and that's not everybody's opportunity. We're working on a different project right now that is very coastal, and so we don't have the ability to be like, well, if you could be 20 miles inland, that would be so much better. So you don't always have that opportunity, but that is one of the keys of Babcock. The secondary keys are really, you have to understand, especially with the ways that hurricanes have been evolving. It's not just storm surge. They're sitting in place for a long time. We're getting a lot of rain, and that also affects when you're further inland. So being able to kind of consider all of those things. Once the water gets in, how do we get the water back out? How do we get it back out quickly? How do we develop different places to store that water? And those are really the keys. And working with nature as we did, like I said, going back to those aerials, we looked at the aerials where the water wanted to go. We didn't want to interrupt anywhere that the water thought it was going to go anyway, because history has just kind of shown us that if we're going to put something in the way that water used to go, it's probably going to fight back sooner or later, and just go straight through where it wanted to anyway. So we tried to make sure to preserve that, and that's really been a key.
Great conversation so far with you, Amy. We're going to take a brief break. We'll come right back with Tidal Flooding Talk. Thanks to the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, your flood insurance bills are lower and your streets safer from the reality of flooding. Since beginning in 2013, we build more resilient shoreline communities. Our member towns develop and share in best practices that anticipate future concerns and create flooding solutions. From our town-specific free web app for flooding information to our weekly Tidal Flooding Talk show, we focus on flooding 24/7. Visit www.njcoastalcoalition.com for more.
Well, welcome back to this week's Tidal Flooding Talk with my co-host Joe Martucci. I'm Dan Skeldon, joined this week by Amy Wicks, owner and professional engineer of Wicks Consulting Group, talking about the fascinating town of Babcock Ranch in southwestern Florida, right, Amy?
Yes,
Uh,
that's correct.
want to discuss a little bit about what's the process then, whether it be a storm surge or a massive rainfall from a tropical system that stalls out, water is coming upon Babcock Ranch. What's the process, and how does the town work to get the water in and out in a quick and efficient fashion to limit or prevent flooding?
So that's the interesting part of it, is we don't actually try to get the water out quick. The question we actually tried to solve for when we started trying to come up with this was, what do we do if the system breaks down? We understand there's typical design components, and we had to look at those design components. But the question, especially with hurricanes and extreme storm events and things that we don't necessarily know how to plan for because they weren't happening yet when we started doing this 20 years ago, was what's going to break in the system. So it was developing a system that was able to function even if portions of the system broke. We actually hold the water in our land longer to make sure that it can get through to the wetlands that will then act as a sponge and have a lot more storage. So we've slowed down the water actually. In our roads and everything, we understand, especially during a hurricane, when you have a lot of debris, there's a good chance that the inlets could get clogged. We wanted to then utilize the roads to channelize our water, to redirect it around homes to the lake so it doesn't build up in the street and then try to flow through houses. And so it's just very strategic. How do we continue to make sure everything's functioning if something breaks? And if something breaks also includes, if we get more rainfall than we anticipated, where does all of it go? So coming up with places that we can store that water if we get too much rain and things like that.
So let's say, I'm driving through Babcock Ranch, right? Is there anything I'm going to notice that's different than, driving around my neighborhood here in New Jersey, whether it's the construction of the roads or the way the houses look, or does it just kind of look like a regular place?
Probably not. I mean, it looks a little bit different than some of the other developments around Southwest Florida, just because we have a lot more native plantings, because we do require native plantings because they don't cause as much debris in a hurricane. They're used to living here. But other than that, you're not really going to see a lot. Now, if I point out things, you'll notice the differences. But if you were driving around on your own, no, you probably wouldn't notice anything.
Do you have like a side business where you go around and show people the differences? Like you drive around a little golf cart or something?
I should. Maybe I can monetize that.
It might be able to.
Amy, have the successes of Babcock Ranch, I mean, tested multiple times by powerful hurricanes that left an indelible mark on other parts of Florida, has word spread throughout the state? Do other communities, you kind of want to take the tricks and the tactics that you guys have learned and implement them if possible?
On a municipal level, we have been getting a lot of municipalities reach out. We've been assisting municipalities trying to come up with code revisions that they could do, or incentive structures on how they can incentivize developers to develop more resilient. Developers, not as much, not as interested. There's still a bit of a mentality of, well, I'm only going to stick around for 2 years until I sell out all of the homes and be out. So it doesn't matter to me. So it's been a little bit of a push and pull, especially in this area. But I have been starting to see more planning boards and stuff like that fight back a little bit and be like, no, you got to do something a little bit better. We're not going to continue to develop this way.
Got it. One of the things you said specifically in your Wall Street Journal video, and again, I recommend everyone taking a look at it, is that the lakes that you have act like a bowl for water. Could you explain what that means when it comes to stormwater management?
Yeah, so essentially every section of Babcock, we do, it just acts like a bowl. Everything drains into the bowl, and then that's where it all leaves the site at the low point. So you have everything as you're staged up the end. If you could just think of a bowl and put a house higher up and higher up and higher up, and you start with a little bit of water, and if you started pouring water into the bowl just on the edge, it's just going to run down right into the bowl. That's the way that it works at Babcock Ranch and much of Florida. What we've done that's a little bit different at Babcock Ranch is we've taken every individual bowl and connected it not just to one other bowl, but several other bowls, just in case one of those pipes, just like kind of with straws, in case pipes or something will break down, get clogged, just to make sure the water still has a way to go to get out in a storm event.
So if you look underground, if you look at an underground cross section of Babcock Ranch, there's a lot going on, right? I mean, you have those pipes you just said, you have the utility lines underneath there. So a lot of, would you say that building underground is the key to success for this?
That's definitely part of it. Yes. It's an important component. Like I said earlier too, though, we also use the roads to convey water in case all of that gets backed up, because we can't. So it's coming up with the redundant systems. What if one thing fails? What can I make work then? And making sure we have those redundant systems in place so the system can continue to function with whatever we're not anticipating that might happen.
I'm just curious, Amy, how big, like a square area is Babcock Ranch?
18,000 acres.
Okay. Okay, and obviously
So
elevation helps, right? So I mean, obviously, the farther inland you are, the farther up in elevation you are, that's definitely going to help versus any hurricane, any flooding event. I mean, but is a coastal area, void of taking what you've done in Babcock Ranch and kind of copying that and recreating that along the coast, maybe modified, but does it have to be a certain elevation to work, or can you do this along the coast?
You can do it along the coast. The hardest thing on the coast is, so we don't have to deal with storm surge. It's very unlikely that the storm surge is going to get to us. We do, however, need to deal with all of the same rain problems and everything else. And so if you discount storm surge for a coastal community specifically and focus more on, except for the fact of getting the water out, which we can talk about that as it relates to New Jersey a little bit more even. But if you focus on getting the water out once the water sits there and how to recover, all of the things that we're doing really can be used in coastal communities as well.
All right, we're going to take one more break. We'll come back on the other side here of Tidal Flooding Talk. We'll talk more about building coastal, or I should say flood-resistant towns here across the country.
Hidden in an abandoned campground in South Jersey lies a mystical encounter with brews and spirits, where bonfires burn, shadows dance, and flavor favors the bold. Ghosts, ghouls, goblins, grown-ups, it's time to reclaim Halloween. This is Witchcraft, October 10th and 11th. For tickets and information, visit witchcraftnj.com.
Hi, I'm Bruce Pascoe. I'm very fortunate. Years ago, I found something that I genuinely like to do, and it's something that helps other people. What I do is help people transition from traditional health insurance into Medicare. I've been doing it here in Atlantic County for more than 20 years. If you're getting ready for Medicare, call me for a free consultation. 609-484-9800.
Us here at the New Jersey Coastal Coalition would like to remind you that if you have substantial damage, to rebuild smart. If your home has been substantially damaged by a flood, special rules may apply before you can rebuild. Reach out to your local building department for guidance. Rebuilding stronger helps protect your future. That's something, Amy, I'm sure you know a lot about. So I want to ask you this. So, I've done obviously tremendous work here in Florida. You built a flood or hurricane-proof town, but from what I read, you're born in Indiana. So what got you interested in flooding resiliency and tropical weather?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I had an amazing professor at Rose-Hulman, Dr. Hotalon. Hopefully he gets to watch this. who convinced me that I was going to love hydraulics and hydrology. And I told him he was wrong, and he wasn't. And so that really spurred my passion for hydraulics and hydrology. And I was fortunate enough early in my career to meet Sid Kitson, who's the developer of Babcock Ranch, who was super passionate about making a sustainable community back before people thought sustainability was a thing. And super passionate about making it resilient and storm safe and having great water quality and a great place to live, and really spurred my passion to kind of be like, okay, this is a nut I can crack. Let's solve it and let's go for it. So those two people really had a huge input in what kind of came out of it, and couldn't have done it without them. But that's how I ended up here.
How long did it create? How long did it take to, you know, from concept to final product to create the town of Babcock Ranch?
We're still doing it. We actually call it a living laboratory. We're continuing to expand and change what we're doing on a daily basis. Just had a conversation with, like I said, Sid Kitson, the developer, last week about, hey, rainfall's getting more intense. I think I want to use a different type of inlets that can take on a little bit more water a little bit faster, just because of the intensity of rainfalls we're seeing now that we weren't seeing 10 years ago or 20 years ago when we started design.
So let me ask you this, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, what about a town that's already developed, right? So you said that you have a place, you know, obviously Babcock Ranch, a place in Georgia that you're working with, but what can you do as part of Wix Consulting Group? Like, can you bring some of these concepts to make it a hurricane or a flood-proof town, as we're calling it, to places that are already developed?
100%. The most opportunity, honestly, and unfortunately, is right after there is a hurricane event, because there's a lot more chance to rebuild and kind of change that infrastructure. However, there's opportunity all the time. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to redo a park, add a park. Let's figure out how to go ahead and incorporate some of the features that can be regional features that will help protect at least that area, depending on how big the park is, for example. As you're repaving roadways, there's opportunities to look at how can I repave this in a resilient design to direct water where I want it to go, or create additional storage in other places. So I really work a lot with municipalities to be like, what do you have coming up? And let's figure out how you can all start talking together, and we can help use these projects that you're already going to do to make your town more resilient.
Joe, it kind of sounds like, you know, kind of one of the founding principles of the Coastal Coalition, right? Where towns work together, you
Absolutely.
know, kind of share ideas that work and make them more resilient. So kind of a interconnectivity here.
Yeah, we might have to have Amy as a speaker at one of our monthly meetings.
Absolutely.
I didn't even tell her that. That was just off the top of my head. You can say no, it's okay. But you know, I think the insights you have would be super valuable. You know, Amy, so you know, let's talk about New Jersey a little bit. And you know, I don't know your familiarity with New Jersey on a professional level, but in terms of, you know, what we have or maybe still need to do here at the shore to protect us and to be more hurricane or flood resilient, is there anything, you know, whether it's positive or, you know, negative, that comes to mind when it comes to New Jersey?
I prepared just a little bit, assuming that you were going to ask something. So, yes, I think one of the positive things is, well, that you get less intense hurricanes, but I'm not saying prepare for less intense hurricanes, because with what's been going on lately, who knows?
Yeah.
But because your shelf is a lot deeper than we have, especially in the Gulf, which is very shallow. All of our water is very shallow in the Gulf, especially just offshore. We have much higher storm surges than you. So your storm surges are much lower. In addition to that, we're much flatter. And so storm surge can push much further inland in Florida than it can in coastal New Jersey. So you're already very protected for the most part. There's a lot of areas that aren't protected, but overall, a hurricane is going to be less catastrophic given the exact same circumstances in Florida and New Jersey, just because it can't push as far if it was the exact same hurricane, which is something that is very good and has you in great shape. On the flip side of that, you're much more developed than most areas in Florida. So once that water gets in, there's not a lot of good ways for it to get out. And that's where I said you can kind of work with different opportunities. When it's repaving roads, you got to figure out how to get the water back out quickly. Recovery is as important, and being able to get back to normal is as important as rebuilding infrastructure to kind of protect yourself up front.
Dan, what she said about New Jersey and the storm surge reminds me of our Dr. Hal Needham, Hurricane Hal, saying that New Jersey will never have, one of the biggest storm surges in the United States just because of everything you said there, Amy. So do you know Hurricane Hal? Are you familiar with him?
No, I'm not at all.
He is the storm surge king of the world.
Yeah, he knows that the highest storm surge in, every state, all across the country, and then some. Fascinating guy.
Yeah, absolutely. We had him on a couple of weeks ago. All right, so we got about 3 minutes left. We're gonna end our episode as we do every week with the one thing we can't stop talking about: tidal flooding or otherwise. Dan, we're gonna start off with you again for a second week in a row.
Okay. Well, we're entering, as we enter into October, my favorite time of the year. Leaves starting to turn, so foliage, number one, and apple picking, and then also sports-wise, you got the baseball playoffs, you got the NFL season. I'm just so excited now. That's pending that the hurricane season stays quiet. We learned from Sandy, it goes right through October, and especially for you, Amy, into Florida, even through November as well. But pending the tropics behave themselves, favorite time of the year for me coming up. Can't wait.
You said sports there, Dan. That's going to go into my one thing I'm thinking about as the baseball season closes and my Baltimore Orioles dramatically underperformed this season. I thought there were big things happening. Everybody got a year older, closer to their prime. Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman, Colton Cowser. The list goes on, but I didn't mention any pitchers because Baltimore has no real ace starting pitchers, unfortunately.
Something to work out in the offseason.
Well, I thought they were last season, and it didn't really work out. So that's what I got. Amy, floor is yours. We got a wide array of things we already discussed.
So, since you went sports, and I had to bite my tongue to start with, but go Noles.
Oh, no. Okay.
We got a good year this year, finally, not
That's
like
right.
last year. But really what I wanted to say, just kind of in closing, because I think it's so important, I really do. We're going to develop and continue to develop the coast. People love living on the coast. We're going to continue to see storms get worse, hurricanes get worse, storms get more intense. It's something that's already a pattern. You can see it statistically in data. So I do want to just emphasize, I think it's very important to make sure we're taking the time to be resilient, focus on resiliency, build back better when we need to build back, but also make sure that we're taking opportunities where opportunities lie to build resiliently and do it the right way.
Excellent things there, Amy, and thank you so much for coming on. Before we close, do you want to let people know where they can find out more about you and your work?
Oh, sure. That would be great. You can go to our website at www.wicks, W-I-C-K-S, C for consulting and G for group. So www.wickscg.com.
Excellent. Yeah, everyone, please check out the website. I've been on there already, and it's a cool website to check out and see the work that she's done. We will wrap it up for this week's episode of Tidal Flooding Talk. We'll be back with you next Tuesday with a new episode. Of course, you can watch episodes anytime, anywhere on our YouTube channels and our social media pages as well. For Amy Wicks and Dan Skeldon, I'm Joe Martucci. See you next time.